Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Midnight Lounge. I am your host, Midnight Lunatic. It's been a while since I've actually said that. I just kind of wanted to just say that. It's been a long time since I actually had that intro. I usually just get going with the whole show. I never really do a full intro. It's kind of good to say it. But today's episode is going to be a very near and dear to my heart episode, a very special episode. This one goes out and is dedicated to my late great father that passed away earlier this year. This one's for him. I'm kind of just going to be showing stories about memories that I've had with him growing up, all the good and all the bad, and kind of just reassessing my relationship with him from the beginning, from what I can remember to the end, and just really just showing my appreciation for him. Even though, me and him didn't end on the greatest note, I still want to kind of just dedicate this episode to him, just because he was a big supporter of my podcast. I know when I started it up, and he found out about it because I told him that I started a podcast. He was so excited, and he was like, "That's so cool! Like, how do you do that? How do you record it? How do you put it on all these platforms that people can listen to? Like, that's wild to me. That's crazy." And he was just always so proud of my podcast and proud of like what I do to it and how I do it. And he was really a big supporter of it. And I know whenever I stopped, whenever I moved out from Phoenix over back to New Mexico and had to stop, he had plans of me, setting my stuff up and starting it back up. But there just really wasn't time and there really wasn't space for me to do it. But he had always asked me, like, when am I going to record a new episode? When am I going to start the podcast back up? And I just always told him, like, it's going to take some time. Like, I don't have my stuff. It's all packed up. And I don't really have the room right now. And he was always, trying to push me to make new episodes. And that time that I was living with him, all the way up until I bought my house that I'm currently in, I didn't put a podcast out. And it was, like, going on, a little over a year, maybe a year. I don't remember exactly how long I kind of took that hiatus for. But yeah, he was always a big supporter of my podcast. And so this one's kind of just going to be very special to me. It might get emotional. I'm going to try not to let it get emotional. But I can't control my emotions. I can't control my feelings. So it's kind of just going to be one of those where we'll kind of just see how it goes. But yeah, I mean, just starting off from far back that I can remember, me being a little kid, we used to live in Reserve, New Mexico. It's a very small town, not really a big community, but at the time it was big to me. And my father was a teacher, and I remember at the time living there, him and my mom were still married, if I can remember correctly. But it was like the final years of them actually being like together married before they divorced, if I can remember correctly. Some of these things I might have wrong. It's just from my memory and my perspective of things. I might not have all the facts right, but this is kind of just what I remember, my memories. So yeah, living back there, we lived in a trailer, and he was a teacher. He used to teach the high school that was there. And man, this was back when I was like super young. I'm talking like maybe 5 or 6 years old. I don't know how I can remember this. And he would always ask me too in recently when I was living with him, like, "Hey, do you remember doing this? Or do you remember going here? Do you remember so-and-so?" And I'm like, no. But in my mind, I was like, kind of, yes, I kind of remember. But like, I don't know. I just always told him no because I didn't want to really relive those memories. And I don't know why. I don't know why I didn't want to talk about those memories with him. Because looking back, like, those were the memories that me and him had that we cherished. Um, and those were the memories that he remembered our relationship by. Was when I was younger and I used to live with him, and it was just me and him, and we'd have so much fun whenever we were over there. So I think he just really wanted to just reflect and just hope that I remembered those memories and those times. Um, but I always shied away. Um, but yeah, he was a teacher at the high school, and I remember like, I was in Head Start at the time. That's like kind of pre-K. And I went there for 2 years, if I can remember correctly. I did Head Start for like 2 years before I finally started kindergarten and grade school. Um, but I remember like after school, I would either stay at the Head Start, and there was a teacher that I would stay with after school until my dad finished up with his classes and then come pick me up. Um, or I'd go over to the teacher's house and she had the Nintendo, and I remember playing Duck Hunt on her Nintendo, and just waited there until my dad picked me up. But sometimes I wouldn't even like want to go home. I'd be like, can I just like stay there? So I was kind of teacher's pet growing up. All the teachers really loved me because they knew my dad. So I was kind of like teacher's pet and teacher's favorites for, as long as I can remember living there. It was a small community, so like everyone kind of just knew each other, and a lot of people knew my dad, and he was not only a teacher, but he was a coach, for the cheerleaders, and I think the basketball team, and I want to say even football too. So, I mean, he was doing different things, and I just remember always like being at the school. And I remember when I started like kindergarten and first grade, it was kind of a blur because I remember going to school there, but also going to school like where I am now. So, like, it was kind of weird. Like, I remember going back and forth between those schools, but I can remember like being in the high school part and waiting for him, and I'd go to the music room, and I would just like the music teacher was also one of my dad's friends, so like I would just be in the music room, and I would like see the high schoolers like play the instruments, or I myself, like if there was nobody in there, would like start messing with them, and like I don't know, just really good memories there. But I remember like, yeah, like after my mom and dad separated, she took my two younger brothers, and I just stayed with my dad, and it was just me and him and my dog at the time. Um, and I remember that dog. I don't remember exactly what she looked like because I mean, I was just so young. I don't remember anything about her. I just remember her name was Girl. And from what my dad would always tell me is without that dog, I would not be here, because he would tell me the story. And I don't know, man. I don't know if it is a true story, but I mean, he always told the story exactly how I'm going to tell it to you. And so that's why I think it was true. But this dog saved my life, literally. He would always tell me the story of the time that me and her were playing outside, and we came across a rattlesnake, and he told me that she jumped in front of me to protect me from the snake, and they pretty much killed each other. She killed the snake, but the snake actually bit her, and the venom was just too much for her to survive. And I don't remember. I don't remember like any of that, but I mean, he would always tell me that story, that that dog like saved my life. And I remember like just hearing that story, and I remember like her leaving me some puppies. And yeah, that's all I can remember, because after that, like, she was no longer around, and I just remember just the puppies. And eventually it got time to like where you give puppies away where they get too old and they have to like start giving them away because we couldn't really take another dog. Especially because like I was so hurt, I didn't really want to keep another dog. I didn't want to get close to another dog because losing her like hurt me. And it's crazy because that dog was the last dog I was super attached to up until I got the dog that I have now. And I had many pets between that time and when I got my dog now. I had plenty pets, but I never fully got super close to them and super attached because I was always afraid of losing them, like I did to my first dog ever. So yeah, it's kind of just crazy that he would tell me these stories, and I would never know if they were true or not, but he would always tell me the stories the same way. So I would imagine they're true, because if they weren't, like, you would think he would change up some of the story, right? But yeah, so we lived in reserve for a good amount of time, and it wasn't until kindergarten or first grade that moved back to where I am now, Silver City area. And I remember going to kindergarten, first grade, and pretty much everything after that here, because I graduated here. And I remember going to kindergarten. I remember going to first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, all the way up until high school. But I knew that, what was it? When we first moved back to Silver City area, we lived in a trailer over in Silver as well, and I kind of remember exactly where the trailer was. Well, not exactly, but I know like the area of which it was. But I don't remember exactly which one it was. I might not even be there to this day, but I remember living there for some time, and then getting older into like second or third grade, moving to where I live now in the Baird area. You guys have no idea what these places are, but this is just my kind of backstory of where I'm from. So I remember moving there, and we were there for a couple years, if I can remember correctly, because I even went to school out of town too. It was like a school that he would teach at, because he had another teaching position in the school out of town in a place called Deming. And I remember going to school there for a bit, and I don't remember what grade. I think it might have been first or second. I was moving around a lot growing up. I just remember going to different schools. And I remember going there for I think 1 or 2 years, but the traveling was just too much, I think it was. So he stopped teaching there. I want to say, yeah, he stopped teaching there. And then after that, I went back and forth between going to his house and staying with my mom. And I remember like going back and forth between the two, maybe up until I was in fourth or fifth grade, third grade maybe. And that's when I just remember kind of just losing touch with him. He became overwhelmed in the world of drugs. And I remember him and my mom fighting because me and my brothers would stay with him at his place, but he would always bring people over. And I remember them always being in the room, and they would smoke and who knows what else. But I remember that. And so growing up, I was pretty much cooking for me and my brother, because he was just too high and too on drugs to do really anything. And I remember my mom and dad fighting about that. And then my mom was like, you know what, let's get you guys out of here. And I remember I was hesitant about going. I didn't want to go because I was just so used to being with my dad growing up. But my mom pretty much did have custody of all of us. So, I mean, technically I had no choice but to go to my mom. And after that, I don't know what exactly happened with my dad, but for years and years, just lost contact, didn't have any contact with him. And I just remember hearing stories that my mom would tell me about him just being on drugs and just being stupid and just all these awful things and horror stories of just what my dad was doing. And I remember it hurt for some time. It hurt, and I was like, I don't have a dad no more. Like, I don't have a father figure. And during those times, I was staying with my grandma and grandpa a lot, because my mom, was working all the time. She was trying to provide for all three of us, me and my brothers. And so me and my brothers, we would pretty much stay at my grandma and grandpa's house for the most part. And my grandpa at the time really stepped up and became that father figure that me and my brothers really needed. And he was amazing, and I miss my grandpa so much. My grandpa passed away in '09. And, at the time I was still young. I was still very young. And I didn't really know what was going on, but I just remember getting the news that he passed away, and it didn't feel real. And I just remember going to the funeral and having to bury him, and it was just a very sad time. And I just remember the feeling of just losing another father figure, and it sucked and it hurt. Just growing up without a father figure was very hard for me. And to lose my grandpa, like it was like losing my dad all over again. It was like losing that father figure. And luckily, like, I had my uncle, and me and him were inseparable, and I kind of learned a lot from him, and he really taught me how to be the man that I am today, and really just showed me, how to just be a guy and be a man. And so for the longest time, I grew up without my dad. And it wasn't until about my freshman or junior year of high school, and I don't remember exactly what had initiated it, but I just remember my mom picking us up from school, I want to say, or maybe it was the weekend, and she asked us a week in advance, like, hey, I kind of want you guys to think about this. You guys are getting older, and I don't want to keep you from having a relationship with your dad. But just remember all the things that had transpired over the years. But I don't want to hold you guys back from having that relation. But would you guys want to talk to your dad again? Would you guys be interested in having a sit-down conversation just to see what he has to say? And I remember all of us just being very hesitant. And me, like, at the time, I was just so angry at him that I was like, no. And for the longest time, I had his last name, which was Salas. And I had that name. And it wasn't until high school that I was like, I want to change my last name. He's no longer a part of my life. Why am I still going to carry his last name? And it was that anger that I was like, he did me so wrong and he left me growing up. It seemed like he didn't care. So I was like, why should I carry his last name? And so in high school, I went through the whole, process of getting my last name changed and all of the legal stuff for that and changed it to my last name that I have now. And I just remember having that conversation with my mom. Like, I understand, and I'm very angry at him, but I want to see what he has to say. And my brothers were still kind of like, I don't really know, because they were so young at the time. They didn't know what was going on. They were still like, in diapers pretty much. So they didn't know what was going on. They didn't know the type of guy that my dad was. And they didn't really know like who he really was. And it was just, my mom was just more concerned on how I was going to feel, because she knew the type of relationship that me and him had. And she knew like the hurt that I felt whenever he did leave and wasn't there. And I just remember telling her like, I don't, but at the same time I do. And so I think it'll be better for me to sit down and hear what he has to say. And if things don't go well, then at least I can say what I want to say and get it off my chest and not have that guilt, and like if it was, did I do something wrong, and kind of get that closure. And I remember going to this park and he was already there and he was sitting down on the table and we pull up and I remember looking at him and I didn't recognize him at first. Like it just, I haven't seen him in so long that I didn't recognize him. He looked like a complete stranger to me, and it wasn't until we started getting closer and that I was like, so this is him, right? And I just remember like this anger taking over me at that time, and just me wanting to just punch him in the face, just punch him as hard as I could, just to let him know how much he hurt me. I wanted him to feel that type of pain that he had caused me growing up. And I just remember like just holding myself back and just sitting down, and I remember like him being kind of nervous, and he didn't really know what to say, and he didn't know how to like introduce himself, I guess. Like he didn't know whether it was okay for him to go for like a hug, if it was just like a hi. Like I can just tell he was nervous about the whole thing, as we were too. We were all nervous, and I know my mom was, and I knew she really didn't want to be there, but again, she didn't want to hold us back from having that relationship. But I just remember having this really long talk with him and hearing his side of things and what he went through and what he did. And he said that he was sorry and he was stuck on stupid and the drugs really got to him and he really messed up and he wished he was there for us and, all these things. And I still just carried this anger with him, and I just like, I did not want to forgive him. I mean, he hurt me, and I wanted him to feel that sort of pain. And I remember sitting there, and I told him with this angry look, and I remember me being angry while telling him this, and I told him, like, you left me and my brothers. You left us when we were so vulnerable. We were so young. And it seemed like you didn't give a shit about us. That you didn't care. That you just wanted to do drugs. You thought drugs were going to be better than we were. and it just sucks growing up without you. And then when I lost my grandpa, like I felt so alone, and you weren't there, and I kind of wish that you never were, and I wish that I wasn't your son. I just remember telling him all these things, and I was so hurt. And I just remember, and I had a tattoo of my last name that I changed it to on my arm, and I still have it, and it was, pretty much dedicated for my grandpa, because I wanted my grandpa's last name, and so that's what I got. And I remember showing him my tattoo and telling him, this right here is my new last name. I no longer want to carry your last name because you weren't there. You weren't my father when I needed you, and he was. So I wanted to change my last name. And I remember showing him the tattoo, and I remember like his face that was like, I knew he was sad about it and he felt bad, but he understood why I did it, and he understood the emotion that I was feeling, and he understood, like just why it happened. And he didn't fight me over it. He didn't, say nothing about it. He just said, I get it, and I'm sorry that I wasn't there. And he just kept, just going on and just apologizing. And, and my brothers were kind of just quiet through the whole thing because, again, they were so young at the time that everything was going on that, like, they didn't know what was really going on. They didn't know what was happening. They just knew that this was their dad in front of them that they never really knew about. And it was kind of just a lot for them too, but they just kind of just stayed quiet, just sitting there, just listening to what was going on between, me and him and my mom and him. And we finally, after about, I want to say like close to 2 hours of just talking at that park, we decided to give him another chance. And it was very hard for me and my mom to really do that, because I remember feeling this deep hatred. Like I can't explain it enough. It was just like this hate towards him, and I just really was hesitant about the whole thing. But he asked, right before we left, he was like, if you guys would allow me to show you that I changed and that I am who I say I am now, and this and that. And he knew that my favorite food was Chinese food, as was his. And there was this one buffet spot that was open. Now it's something different. It's still an Asian place, but they sell sushi and everything. It's like an actual restaurant. It's no longer buffet, but it's in that same building. So kind of like when I go inside of there, it kind of reminds me of that time. It does. It really does. And I can't help but think about that time every time I go to that restaurant. But I remember him asking, like, "Are we hungry? Like, are you guys hungry? Like, you guys want to go out to eat?" And just continue to talk and, and start over, and just being hesitant. But I was also hungry, and I was like, okay, yeah, that's fine. And so I remember, like, we all went there and we all started eating, and we started, like, kind of easing up a bit and kind of starting to crack jokes, and, and started like kind of having fun. But at the same time, like, I was still just kind of hesitant, but like at the same time, like, I was having fun. I was having a good time at that moment, that I guess we kind of all just kind of like let our guard down. And he was like, well, I mean, I live right here and I do this. And he then told us that he had become a pastor of a church, and he goes to church every Sunday, and he works there, and he's a pastor. And if we guys ever wanted, if me and my brothers ever wanted to go, that we could, and if we wanted to stay the night with him, we could. And so I remember like that was the start of rebuilding our relationship. And I remember on weekends, when we'd get out of school and stuff, we would ask to go over. And I remember before all that, like after the whole interaction and us going out to eat and going back home and going to my grandma and grandpa's, my grandma's, I would say, because my grandpa had passed away after that. But she would ask, like, what happened? Like, how are you guys feeling? Like, what did he say? Did we tell him anything? And I kind of just told her, like, everything that happened. And she was kind of hesitant about everything, too, because she knew the situation. She knew, like, what went on. And so she was kind of like that protective grandma, like, well, is this something that you guys really want to do? Do you guys really want to start that connection? Do you guys really want to start that over? Like, can you trust him? Like, how do you know he's not going to do this type of stuff again? Like, just really being protective and really asking these deep questions that, like, I didn't really have answers to, but, like, she made it apparent that she was just trying to ask these questions to get us to think if this was the right move, if this was the right call, if this was what we wanted to do. And I just remember, like, telling her, I'm going to see how it goes. I remember telling her, like, I'm gonna see how this goes, and if I don't see a change and I don't see, like, him turn over his life and be a better person, then we don't have to build that connection. We don't have to continue talking. And, my grandma was just like, are you sure? Like, are you sure this is what you want to do? Are you sure this is what you want? And so that was kind of like the start of everything. And I remember after school on the weekends, we would kind of just go over to his place and we'd go to church with him, and it was a really fun time. I really enjoyed those times, when he was a pastor there, and we had good times and met a lot of, interesting people at church and made some friends and just had good memories. And I just remember staying at his place a lot, especially during the summertime. We'd be at his place almost every other day and stay the night for like 2-3 days at a time and just build that relationship. And he would cook us dinner and we would watch TV and all this other good stuff. And it was a really good time. And then I'm not too sure exactly what happened, but I remember him stepping down from being a pastor and him having to move. And during that time, he had gotten sick. And I don't remember exactly what was going on, because even before he had to move, he was in the hospital. He was in and out of hospitals, but he would never really share information on why he was there. He would never really share, like, give information on what he was doing at the hospital, why he was there and getting checked up and having these operations. And I remember, like, just him being sick, and he had to move out of the trailer that he was living with and move over to another one that was right across the street from his parents. And he was there for some time, and at that time I was beginning, I think, senior year of high school. And that was when my youngest brother started living with my dad. And I think my brother was, I want to say he was middle school, about to go into high school. And it wasn't until after I graduated that he started his freshman year. So it was around that timeline where like I was at the end of my senior year and the start of like my brother's freshman year the next year that my brother was living with him. And I'm not too sure what happened with that house. I guess he couldn't afford the rent. I know at this point he was pretty much like on disability. He couldn't really work too much if I can remember. But at the same time I do remember him working like at the Snappy Mart and stuff like that too. So maybe that was later down the line where he got disability. Maybe he was just working a job that it wasn't enough to pay the bills. I don't exactly remember. But I remember him moving out and then moving into the place that he currently lived at in the apartments right where my brother lives. And that was like the last place where, that was his last home. And I remember after high school, I moved out of state. I moved to Virginia, stayed there a couple months, and then moved out to Phoenix and was there for like almost 10 years. And during that time, he was still living in the apartments, and I remember trying to come down on Christmas time and take that Christmas vacation, and I would stay over at his place during that time, so I'd be between his house and my uncle's house. And this is kind of where it gets kind of rocky, because at the time I was living in Phoenix, I didn't really see him a lot. I didn't really visit a lot. I was always working. I couldn't really take days off. But I just remember him calling me every single night. And we would just have conversations. About an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours long. And we would just talk. And we would just talk about just random nonsense. And I remember he'd always have to take pills for the pain that he was in, and all these, painkillers and other meds that he would have to take. And I remember just having these conversations, and it was funny because after a while, like, you can hear his like whole voice kind of change, where you knew like his pills kind of kicked in, because then he started murmuring and like just speaking nonsense and like not even saying words. And every single day I would because he would call me right before he would take them, and it was like his bedtime. And I would tell him every time he would start murmuring or like speaking nonsense, I'm like, yeah, your pills have kicked in. Go to sleep. Go to sleep. And I remember like him just laughing and us just kind of laughing about it. And I was like, yeah, go to sleep. You're speaking nonsense now. And I'm really going to miss those conversations. Just hearing his voice and telling me that he loved me, and just hearing his laugh, and just everything about those conversations, man. It's just, if I could have one more conversation with him, just to hear his voice one more time, his laugh one more time, man, I'd give everything right now to be able to do that. But I remember having all those conversations up until the point where I could no longer afford to live in Phoenix, and I remember him helping me out on rent at the time, because I was in between jobs and I had struggles finding a new job and struggled to pay rent. And I was lucky enough for him to be able to help me with my rent. And I remember telling him that I was going to move back, and he was excited about it. And he was like, yeah, you can come live with me and you can continue doing your podcast and all this stuff. And when I moved down, I decided to live with my brother, and that didn't really work out. So then I started living with him, and it started off good living there, and it wasn't until the very end that it completely changed. And I'm not too sure what it was, but we just clashed and butted heads, and it really got ugly. And I just remember leaving that day and having nowhere to go, and my uncle took me in, and that's kind of like current day where we are now, where I found a house and now I'm here. And I just remember, just after moving out, I told him, that I no longer wanted to talk to him, and he could go to hell. And I've told you guys this before, but my biggest regret is the last words that I said to him, that I really wish I could take back. Because the last words that I told him were, why don't you drop dead already? I really wish I could take that back. Because now that he's gone, and today I was really thinking about him, and that's why I decided to record this. But man, to just be able to have that final conversation, to be able to hug him one more time, to hear him tell me that he's proud of me and that he loves me. I really wish I can get that again. I love you, Dad, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry this got emotional. I tried my best, but like I said, I can't control my emotions, and it's still raw. It's still a raw subject, and it's always going to be a raw subject. And I know a lot of you will kind of feel the same way. Man, it sucks, because I feel like I didn't really have that relationship that I really wanted to as a kid. And when we started talking again in my older days, it was cool. Like, it felt like I had a dad again. And towards the end, it was like my childhood all over again. And it hurt having to move out of his place. And I remember being so stressed out, and I remember crying too. Like, why, what did I do? What did I do wrong? And kind of just blaming myself for everything, and just like how I did in my childhood. And it was all just too much. And man, I wish things were different. I wish things played out differently. And like, I blame myself for his final days. I blame myself just because it makes me wonder, like, what if I stayed there with him? What if I was still living with him? Would he still be here today? If I was still living with him and didn't leave him alone, would he still be alive? would I still be able to have a conversation with him? And I never told anyone that, but I blame myself for that. I blame myself. And I remember when that day came and my brother was saying that he blamed him. That my brother was the one, and he said that he was the one, and it was me. I was the one. Because I was the last one to live with him. I was supposed to be the one to take care of him, and I was responsible. But as time goes on, it's getting easier. Today, like days like today, it's hard. It's still raw. It's still tough. It's still hard to really mentally think about, and still emotionally just a lot to take in. It still feels brand new. But I do see some light in it. He's no longer in pain. He's no longer suffering, because I knew his roughest days, he wanted it to die. He wanted it to just end. He wanted the suffering to just end. And I would always get mad every time he would say that. Like, he would always say, like, I wish I would just wake up, or just not wake up tomorrow, because this is just too much. And I just remember getting mad at him, like, shut the fuck up, don't say that. And just not knowing the true pain that he was actually feeling. And it's just all the drugs he did when he was younger that fucked up his life, but ruined our relationship. Man, it goes to show that, like, don't do stupid shit. Don't do drugs when you have kids. Don't fucking do drugs at all, because shit like this happens where you fuck up the rest of your life and you're in pain. And if you have kids, shit like this can happen where you fuck up a relationship and you never get that back. Fuck, man. I if you got to this part, thank you guys for listening. It was a lot for me to do this. Something I didn't really want to do, but man, like, I had to do it in memory of my dad. Man, he was a big supporter of this podcast, and I wish I just didn't have to make this episode. But thank you guys if you're still listening and taking the time out of your day to listen to my stories that I had. There was a lot of, in between moments, like going fishing as a kid with my dad and going camping and things like that. Just some really good moments, really fun moments. Going to the football games that he would coach, or the basketball games, or hanging around the cheerleaders when he was coaching them. And, those were all good memories. And living in reserve and going to this little movie rental place. And I remember always renting out the Land Before Time videos and going home and watching those. And I remember my candy was like the Rolos, like the little chocolate caramel things at the time, and I remember getting those and eating those while I watched the movie and then falling asleep. And it's a lot of good memories that I chose to block out. But as I'm recording this, like, I'm just having these flashbacks of all these memories that I just blocked out for so many years and just didn't want to really remember. And I just wish I had more memories with him. But the ones that I do remember and the ones that I shared with you guys right here today, those are the ones that I'll always remember and appreciate. Even the bad ones. Life it's crazy. It has its good moments, it has its bad moments, and I just wish I had more time with them. If you have parents and they're sick, man, just call them up and let them know that you love them, because you never know. You never know if that's gonna be their last time. And don't be like me, and now I have to live a life of regret knowing that I never made right with my dad. Don't be like me. Love your parents, and even if they don't treat you the best and you don't have the best relationship, man, they're still your parents, man, and they love you. Even though I said those horrible things to my dad, he still loved me, man. He would ask my brother about me all the time if I was good, and he still loved me. And that's what keeps me going. That's my bright side to this, is knowing that he still asked about me even though I told him those things, and he still loved me, man. And that's what I appreciate. That's what keeps me going. And fuck, man. Alright, I gotta get out of here. I can't keep crying like this. I hope you guys enjoyed. I know it's probably not the episode you guys really wanted, but I had to give you guys another raw, uncut, uncensored, unfiltered, whatever, raw emotion episode, man, of the memories of my dad. Rest in peace, Dad. I love you. This one goes out to you. Alright, guys. Until next time, be safe. I love you guys. And until the next time, see you guys later. Bye-bye.